Okay, this next assignment that we're going to go over is your emergency action plan assignment. Now, hopefully you have already done the emergency assessment lecture portion of the class. If you haven't, you need to stop this video and go through that lecture, answer all of the review questions. Because if you haven't, this assignment's going to be a little more difficult to do, and part of this assignment is going to come from that lecture. So you'll see there are overall 9 questions on here, okay? The first, let's see, 1 through 8, okay, all but the last questions are going to come from the actual EAP example that I have provided you on D2L Brightspace. But the number 9 is going to come from the actual lecture that you're responsible for doing this week. So all this information is going to be found on the EAP example, and I'm going to walk you through the EAP example. So hopefully you got this in the lecture, but if you didn't, the purpose of an emergency action plan is basically your plan of action that you're going to implement anytime there is an emergency situation. So for this, every single sports team has to have an EAP, okay, because they're going to be at different sites, they're going to have different coaching staffs, and depending on the sport, some emergency procedures are handled differently than others, okay? So things that we will handle in football as far as equipment removal, you're not really going to have in soccer or track and field. So your EAPs are going to be a little different depending on the different types of emergency situations you may run into with that sport. But along with every sport having one, they also have to have one for every single site that they will be at. So for example, your football team may practice at one field that may be on campus, and then they might play at another field for their games at an outside field. So for example, Georgia State football, they have a practice facility in Panthersville, but then for their games they play in the Georgia Dome. So they have to have EAPs for both sites. The example that I'm giving you is one that I wrote for a high school that I worked at. Okay, so up at the top you'll see this heading, okay, and this is a very important heading. So it says the following EAP is for the DM Thorell High School Educational Complex football field. Okay, so I first need to know that this is an EAP, okay, because people don't always read the fine print. Okay, even though this is a heading, they may be looking at it and have no idea that that's what it is. So you need to say that it is an emergency action plan or an EAP, and then you need to say for what school it's for and the location. Okay, so DM Thorell High School Educational Complex, the football field there, and then hopefully you know that it is for the football team. Okay, so if it was a male and female sport, you could say the following EAP is for the Thorell High School Educational Complex football field, and then a hyphen for men's soccer, okay, or women's soccer, or whatever you want to have there, okay? But for this one, for this example, we're just talking about the football team. So after that, you have the site address. Okay, I need the actual street address, city, state, zip code would be helpful, and then also a phone number for a landline at the facility. Okay. You need to have important contact information for on-site personnel. Okay. So your different coaching staff, and again, some of these coaching staffs can get really lengthy, especially if you have 10 or 12 coaches. But the most important coaches are the head coaches of each, whether it's the head coach for defense, head coach for offense, whatever it is. You just want to make sure you have everybody on there that is going to be relevant in an emergency situation. You need to know who your certified athletic trainer is. You may have an assistant athletic trainer. You need to include who the athletic director is, and then you also need to include what's called an administrator on duty. For example, at a high school, it's usually the principal, or it might be another faculty member that is the administrator on duty for that event. These people are really important for crowd control, because if you've ever been in an emergency situation, everybody wants to see what's going on. Everybody wants to record a video of it so they can then put it on Instagram or Vine or tweet about it or put it on Facebook. And sometimes with these extensive injuries in these emergency situations, we don't really need that information out there. Okay, if I have an athlete going into cardiac arrest, I'm sure he and his family do not want that posted on Instagram or Facebook or whatever before a final decision has been made on that athlete. Okay, so always make sure you include an administrator on duty just to help with crowd control in these situations. So you also need to list the emergency supplies that are on site. So for this plan, I give you what's out there during practices and then what's out there during games. So one thing you'll notice is for practices, especially if a lot of teams are going at one time, the athletic trainer may not be on the sideline. They're going to be on campus, but they may be doing rounds, especially if 4 or 5 teams are practicing at the same time. So there needs to be kind of a protocol for who does what in the event that the athletic trainer isn't on site. Okay, but they will be on campus. And then for games, the athletic trainer will be there. So you would write it in the event that the athletic trainer is on site. Okay. So you'll see I give you kind of the chain of command as far as head coach is the main contact if the athletic trainer is not on site. And if the athletic trainer is on site, they're going to be the top of the chain of command. Then I give a basic plan of action during an emergency. So I tell you kind of who does what. So the head athletic trainer is going to take the lead on treating the athlete. The head coach is going to be responsible for activating EMS. The assistant coach is going to go unlock the outer gates, okay, because you have to have access to the field. The athletic director is going to assist the athletic trainer if they need someone to go find the AED or they need someone to go get, a vacuum splint or something for an open fracture. They know where those are, and they know that it's their job to go get it in that situation. And then you'll see a principal or on-site representative just for crowd control. All right, so the last 2 sections are directions. So the first direction is going to be, okay, what is the lay responder or the person that is making the 911 call going to be able to say? So they need to be able to give them specific directions to the event site, how they're going to get in. Be like, all right, you need to go in the north gate, or you need to go in the south gate, or you're going to come off, Peachtree Road and come in the south gate and take the next right. Okay, it needs to be very specific because especially if EMS has never been to that site, they're going to have absolutely no idea where to go, and you don't want them lost. Sorry, I need to turn these notifications off really bad. You don't want EMS getting lost whenever they're trying to provide emergency care to someone, okay? All right, so the last portion is going to be venue directions for EMS personnel. So again, exactly step-by-step how to get in there, okay? But you need to have this written down, okay? You can't just go off verbal what the lay responder is going to say. Go ahead and have it written down so that if the lay responder is kind of having trouble focusing because they just saw an open femur fracture and that's going to make anybody a little queasy, they have it step by step so they can read it to the EMS dispatcher, okay? So it's just really helpful in those emergency situations because honestly, you're not going to know how someone's going to respond until you put them in that situation. So I have kind of gone through the example. So from all of that, you should be able to find all of this information. You are going to have to refer back to it to answer some of this stuff. One important thing about EAPs is the best way to get the information across to your coaching staff is going to be to hold some sort of meeting where you actually go through the plans. So you actually give coaches a paper copy because if you email out an electronic copy, they're not going to read it. So have a meeting, hand it out to them, make sure they are familiar with it. The other thing is you need to actually practice this. So a lot of places don't do this, but I think it's really important for everyone to be on the same page in an emergency situation. So really you only need to practice these annually, so once a year, that's sufficient enough. But, excuse me, your coaching staff needs to be very familiar with it because, like I said, when you see an open femur fracture, that's going to make anybody queasy, okay? Your athlete's also going to go into shock. And sometimes people that are supposed to be helping you out in these situations, they may go into shock themselves, especially if they're not used to handling emergency scenarios. So the entire athletics staff needs to be familiar with it, because say the athletic director is supposed to help me get any supplies, but he's puking on the sidelines because he just saw an open femur fracture. All right, well, I'm going to need somebody else to step up and go get whatever supplies I may need, because I can't leave the athlete. So if everyone's, familiar with it, everyone's going to be able to help out, even though they may not be specifically written into the plan as doing that action. And then the red flags question is going to come from the lecture that you have access to on D2L. So, should be a fairly easy assignment. Just kind of giving you the ins and outs of what all is involved for an emergency action plan, and hopefully it will help you in the future if you ever have to write a plan yourself.